Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and we have a red team card to talk about today. The muchly anticipated, could say it was envied that China kind of got their own card. A bit back to front with what seems to, well no, it's not back to front actually, but without kind of sanctions. They just got their own card to start off with, but AMD has decided to bring it into the rest of the world. So there's lots and lots of specs and stuff online, but the only thing that really caught my attention more than anything that wasn't kind of, you can, when they say that they're going to do this, you get kind of a feel and you get a vibe of what it's going to be anyway. And it was only really the pixel fill rate that was a little bit less than I was expecting it to be from the 7900 XT. But the most important thing that we really need to cover straight away is pricing. Now, 519 GBP is the price that I've been given from AMD as kind of the entry level one. Now I have two cards here today. I have the Pulse and then I have the Nitro Plus. Both of these are slightly overclocked. So the Pulse, you'll see we've marked it as 519. It's probably going to come in a little bit more than that, but I haven't had any concrete prices from Sapphire yet in GBP. So we've put the Pulse in there, but it may come in at 540. The Nitro Plus, probably going to be around the 579-ish mark, but again, I'm literally doing, I can't do a direct dollar to GBP based on the exchange rates because you do have to add VAT in on top, and then normally there's a little bit of wiggle room either lower or higher with the e-tailers at launch as well. So these are just rough guesstimates because I haven't been given anything guaranteed, but we do know that AMD said that the base price is going to be 519. So we'll go from there and then we'll see what happens. You may see a £600 Nitro Plus, but I can't say, so that we just needed to put it in there somewhere. Anyway, one of the most important things to look at in that graph, other than the two AMDs, in reality, is the 4070. Now, when Nvidia did launch the Super, I did personally think that keeping the 70 was very, very pointless. I obviously know that they needed to shift the last of them, but I just didn't understand why they kept it and they had discontinued the 4080. Obviously they weren't selling. Anyway, they knocked the price down a little bit, but now when it kind of sits here between these two cards, I'm not going to say it makes sense, but pitching them between an entry-level card and then an overclock card or a high-end card kind of does put it into a competitive territory, which is an unusual thing for Nvidia to be able to be said. But that's obviously just price-wise. We need to look at performance more in depth. I am going to tell you straight away, though, that there was a lot of stuff online where people were like, oh yeah, AMD are going to release a 4080 killer for 549. No. But anyway, so that is our pricing. What we're then going to move on to is clock speeds. No, actually, we need to look at the cards because the Pulse is kind of there's no lighting on it, although there is red on it, but that doesn't light up. It is just printed. It's just a black, nice card. It shares the same fans with the other one, but it's just, you fit it and forget it. It's a graphics card. You do get a metal backplate. You'll see the temperatures and stuff in a minute, and then it's lovely. With the Nitro Plus, it looks like all of the other Nitro Plus. Like genuinely all of them, they're the same size, it's got the same fans. Other than. With the 7800 and now the 7900, you don't get the RGB on the bottom of the card because there is one right down near the slot, which is kind of handy when you have it vertically mounted. And yes, this is a white 7900 XTX, but I did it myself. So they have an extra RGB section down here. As you can see, there's two. But with these ones, they don't have it. So that's the only real noticeable difference between the two cards, which, other than, mine's white, they all look exactly the same, which is a really nice thing because if you buy one of the lower end ones, people aren't really going to know whether you've got that or one of those unless they start counting connectors and stuff, because that does have an extra. But anyway, and you still get the 4-pin fan header on the end. You still get an RGB connector on it as well. Although I do think that the RGB header and the 4-pin fan header should have been like shoved right over in the corner a little bit more. But nevertheless, very, very pretty card. Now, the reason why I did want to kind of wade in straight away with clock speeds is when we're talking about the two cards kind of going head to head, because I do kind of need to pick the difference between these apart first, and then we'll go and look at the difference between the Nvidias later. Because if I'm honest with you, you're probably here because you've already decided that you want one of these and you don't know which one that you want. So I need to try and help you decide whether it's going to be worth that little bit of extra money on your part to spend it between the two. And is it just aesthetics? Is it just cooling? So we will find out. You know the difference between the aesthetics at the moment, but maybe you like a bit of a black and red Knight Rider kind of theme. Knight Rider, showing my age there. Anyway, clock speeds. Popping the graph up, what we can see there with the Nitro Plus is with the rated, which is what they say like the clock speed is, you get 125 megahertz extra on the Nitro Plus. You get 86.9 extra on average. Average is really critical because it doesn't matter whether you peak. You could literally have had a peak speed there, could have had a peak speed there of 3000 megahertz. But if the average clock is still 2210.8, if the average was the same, it's more than likely still going to perform the same. So we do need to know that average clock, and it's just as important on red as it is on green. So you get 85, 87 basically megahertz extra on average, which does make a big amount of difference. And then when you look at the peak speed, you can see it's 146 extra on the peak, but you don't get as much on the average, do you? It's because clock speeds move up and down a lot. So if you've got one that's 90 megahertz on average more than all the others, you're going to get 90 megahertz more of lovely, lovely clocking. Anyway, the difference between the two coolers is effectively 11 degrees. Which is an awful lot when you think about it, and a lower 11 degrees lower if you go to the Nitro Plus. You do need to remember you could just turn the fan profile down a little bit if you wanted and make it super, super quiet. There's obviously loads of differences that you can do here, but obviously you've got a slightly thinner graphics card on this one. This one's triple slot, this one's, it's 2.5 almost, but it is a little bit thicker on this one, and you've obviously got like beefier fins, more surface area for it to be able to cool from. So it does a much better job between the two. And if you think that they were tested in a 20 degrees room in exactly the same way with exactly the same game at the same ambient, that is a huge difference between two so similar cards. Something else to bring up as well, with that 11 degrees difference in between the two cards, you'd think they'd be pulling, one would be pulling loads more power, and it's not. They're so close on the power graph, it is ridiculous. So don't go thinking that you have to worry about that. And you do also need to remember with that power graph is the full system. That's a 13900K being tested, because we basically just test what's being pulled from the wall and then give you the number. And I think that's a pretty fair way of doing it, because you're going to know roughly what sort of power supply that you're going to want for one of these. So you could comfortably run this on a 750 watt if you wanted to cut it fine. I'd personally be saying with this you want 850 to 1000 maybe, just so that you're running it in that sort of sweet spot, about 50% ish, so that the power supply is not being stressed, nothing's getting too hot. It's just kind of finding that middle ground where you want to be with plenty of headroom. It's also a really good place for efficiency. Anyway, we need to move on into performance testing. Now I'm going to start here with Call of Duty. Call of Duty is kind of good because you do get fairly decent frame rates, but at the same time it does support Intel XeSS. It's got FSR2 built in. It's also got DLSS built in, so it's quite a good way for us to be able to compare, although it does also work very well with the AMD graphics cards, as you'll see when we chop things into the mix here. So effectively, if we go midships, you can see that you've got the the normal ones, and when I say normal, that is just vanilla run. We haven't put any scaling on or anything like that. And then it's doing quite well against the 4080. But that is a very rare one where it's going to be doing that against the 4080. If you go further up the graph though, what you can see is when you turn the FSR on though, it is there trading places with the DLSS 4080 as well. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to pick this, because it's one of those ones where you can say, if you've got Call of Duty, it is doing fairly well with it. Then we've started testing a new one, and we went with Avatar Frontiers of Pandora because it does support FSR 3. Not only does it support FSR 3, but you do actually get an option within the game to be able to turn AMD frame generation on and off as well. So we tested it normal, we tested it with FSR 3, then we tested it with fluid motion frames turned on as well. So there's quite a bit in that graph for you to be able to dissect. What I will say though is you can see that the fluid motion frames pretty much, well, almost doubles the frames. But if I'm honest, the FSR, the difference that it made was very, very healthy as well. Now, we were limited with the amount of cards that we could test with this because we did it very, very quickly on Friday just to be able to get some numbers to be able to show you, but this will get populated with more results really quickly. But we just wanted to make sure that we had this in there. And obviously I'm showing you this at 4K. If you go over to the website, there is 1440p results there, 1080p results. There's actually loads more other games that I'm going to show you today. And every single one of the tests that we've done for the card today has been at 1080, 1440 and 4K. So we've gone for high frames, we've gone for gamer frames, and then we've gone for stress it out. I've got big bucks frames as well. Then moving on, F1 2022. This is at 4K, and one of the reasons why I wanted to show you this is with F1 2022 you do have ray tracing on as standard. You cannot turn it off. So, but they also give us the option to be able to enable FSR 2.1 on this, so it does give us quite a good feel for ray tracing without it being too ridiculous. But if you go down, look towards the bottom, without FSR turned on at 4K, the frames were fairly low. But obviously that is 4K. We also test in Singapore in the rain. It's really stressful, but we test them all the same. So it's kind of, it gives you a feel for it. But when you turn FSR on, you're up there in the 80 frames per second, and that's being surrounded by some beefy graphics cards. You can see the 4070 in there just underneath it, and you can also 4070 Founders with DLSS, and then it's just below a vanilla rated 4090. So that's a 4090 without any DLSS or anything like that turned on. But this is one of the few ones where I'm going to show you 4K, and then I'm going to show you 1440p just to show you the difference. So I personally think if you then go down to where they are being run vanilla, you can see that we're up to 80 frames per second. When you bump up, we're over 100, well, over 128-ish for one, but you go up to 144 for the Nitro Plus. So that clock speed makes a huge difference in this, especially when you take away that 4K drain and you go to 1440. I personally think that if you haven't got megabucks to be spending on graphics cards because you want high frame rates and playing 4K, I still personally think that a really nice monitor, fast IPS screen, something like that, that isn't going to cost you a fortune at 1440p, matched with a decent, and some people would say this is a mid-range graphics card, but upper mid-range, matched with a decent card like this, you can get some really high frames. So if you think about it, the Nitro Plus is almost hitting that 144 threshold. Now, if you've got VSync enabled, you do need to remember it goes in steps, 90, 120, 144, but it does mean that you're probably going to be getting 120 frames plus. Flick VSync on and you're just laughing anyway, but it does go to show you that 1440p made this massively different if you are playing a fast-paced game. And for those of you out there that are doing that with FPS games and stuff like that, flicking the res down and then just having something with loads more eye candy, I personally think is the way forward. Anyway, so I didn't really draw too much attention to the 4070 in those graphs, but it does consistently trade places with the 4070. COD, sure, we saw the 4080 in there. I specifically spotted that result in the graph and wanted to draw attention to it because it's nice to say positive things. It's also nice for you to know that if you have bought a GRE and you play COD, then people out there that have spent £1,000 are getting about the same sort of frames as you are. Anyway, 4070 seems to be about where it is, and it trades places. Some of the games, if you go and have a look on the website, some of the games you'll see the GRE are above. You'll also see some of the games where the GRE are mixing around the pack, but it's never too far below. If you go up to the 4070 Super, it gets a bit thinner. 4070 Ti Super, nowhere near it. So it is down near the 4070 more than anything else. But I do need to stress, even AMD said it was in that ballpark anyway. So if it's in that ballpark and they know it's in that ballpark, the prices are actually all very close as well. So I think if you're thinking about buying one of these, you just need to go and have a look at the games that you're going to be playing, or if you're here because you just don't like green or you want to kick the trend and you want to be investing in something else, then in reality you need to be deciding whether you want something a little bit cheaper with no flash, or whether you want something with a little bit more flash, lower temps, but it does deliver that extra bit of performance as well. I have to admit, if I was pushed to decide between these two, I probably would go with the Nitro, just because of the customizing side of things, the fact that the temperatures are that little bit lower, and then that means I'm going to have a quieter life. And I don't think you buy one of these to sit by the side of it for 6 or 12 months. You're going to be invested in this for quite a long time. So I think that little bit extra, if you can afford it, is probably going to be worthwhile. And in case you're wondering, I normally would have had an XFX in the mix for this, but they don't seem to want to send any out to press. They said to me they weren't going to be sampling it. So I think they're probably hoping that the brand side of things is going to carry through, or maybe it's just not important to them. But a £500 7900 does, in sort of like Top Gear maths, it sounds better than a £475 7800. Now, I don't know whether you noticed in the graphs, but some of the 7800, so we've got the Power Colour Hellhound, for example, 7800 XT, the XFX is in there, and the Sapphire was in there. These were consistently in front of those. It was never the buy very much though. But if there's like £50 in between the price of that and that, that's where the naming scheme kind of comes in. And I think that you're more than likely going to spend a little bit extra on a 5900 than you are by trying to get a slightly faster 7800. Also, I don't think on AMD's part, having the sort of price bracket so tight is such a good idea. The difference between the 5900 GRE and the 7900 GRE and the 7900 XT, I had a look, and we're still looking at about £150. In some regards, depending on the cards, it can be £200 difference. I think that's a healthy gap in between, because then you can get the overclocked cards in. But when you're going from those kind of prices, it gets a little bit more complex. But anyway, I personally think that if you were to have to decide between a 78 and a 79, you're probably going to be like, well, I'll pay a bit extra for the 79 because the 9's there. But do remember, yes, this one was slightly cooler, but if you're willing to spend some time undervolting this and maybe upping your clocks a bit, you're probably going to get as far as you would have done with this. You're just going to be limited in the end by the silicon that's on it because of the silicon lottery, but then also the cooler and how quiet you need things to be, how quiet you need your case to be. But it's definitely something where you should be tweaking at home when you buy a lower card, because it's pretty much been done for you if you buy the Nitro Plus OC. Deep breaths. So 4070-ish kind of performance, 4070-ish kind of price, and I think it puts the cat amongst the bags in reality, because it means that Nvidia can't just walk off into the distance with some of that mid-range-ish pricing. And there are plenty of people that just don't want to buy green. So if you want to jump red, then you've got quite a few options now, haven't you? Anyway, this is the tiniest one with another video for you. If you've enjoyed the video, please remember to like, subscribe, comment. There's loads more information on the website, loads more graphs. You can pick everything apart over there. And it's a brand new website as well. It's much easier to use. And if you're on your phone, you can do all the zooming and all the normal stuff that you should have been able to have done with us years ago. Anyway, I'm going to grab my remote. I'm going to thank you very much for tuning in. And I'm going to say goodbye with the normal thing by going ding. I love you, sis.